everyone, and welcome to lesson 9 now for National 5 Chemistry. And today what we're going to have a look at is we're going to have a look at something called carboxylic acids. It's a new homologous series for us to have a wee focus on. So following on from the alkanes, the alkenes and the alcohols, everything we've done so far in Unit 2, we now come on to the last homologous series that you need to know about, and this homologous series is known as the carboxylic acids. Now, the carboxylic acids have a different functional group than we're used to. We'll draw it, we'll have a look at it, and I've also got it in a molecular model for you to have a look just now as well. So our functional group, very important, it's the part that makes our carboxylic acids. So our functional group is called the carboxyl group. Okay, so the carboxyl group. Okay, this is the name of it. So if you're ever asked in a question to name the functional group, this is what I would like you to put. I don't want you to draw it. I don't want you to see the shorthand that we do for it. This is the name of the functional group. It is the carboxyl group. Okay, so for our alcohols, it was hydroxyl. For our carboxylic acids, it is carboxyl. So the carboxyl functional group looks like a carbon with a double bond to an oxygen, a single bond to another oxygen, and it's like our hydroxyl, but it's got this double bond there, and then a bond to the rest of my molecule. So this is my carboxyl group. Sometimes you might be shown a structure and it might ask you to circle the functional group or circle the carboxyl group, and this, including this carbon, is what I would like you to identify. This whole thing, COOH, is my functional group. You might hear some teachers, we refer to it sometimes as the COO group, so you'll see it written in shorthand, and I'll show you that soon, as being COOH. Okay, this is the name, this is what it looks like, this comes in the shorthand and the shortened structural formula that we'll have a look at in a second. So let's have a look at this in a molecular model just now. So I've got a full model here, but here is my carbon. My carbon has a double bond to an oxygen. Okay, now that oxygen, its valency is satisfied. This carbon is also singly bonded to another oxygen which has a hydrogen attached to it. Okay, so this is my functional group, this is my carboxyl group. That then leaves one space for this carbon to be bonded to the rest of the chain if we have a longer chain of carbons. Now it's quite important actually to think of this carbon, 1, 2, 3 bonds are being taken up just by the functional group, and so there's only one more bond, so it cannot be in the middle of a chain. So carboxylic acids are actually easier in terms of drawing and naming because you don't need to worry about where it is in the chain, we don't need to worry about numbers, it's always at the end. Okay, it can't possibly be in the middle because you can't have another bond to that carbon. It's also really important, and I just want to highlight just now, this double bond to an oxygen is not the same as a carbon-carbon double bond. I've seen quite a lot in the past when we look at the reaction of alkenes and when we add bromine water, and alkenes will decolorize bromine water. This does not react in the same way an alkene does. This is completely different, so please don't mix them up. So this is my functional group, and I'm looking to extend the chain in here. So in terms of drawing these and having a look, let's just kind of draw a line under this part just now and think of our first member of the series. So if I have my number of carbons, and we are going to start with just having one carbon. Now that one carbon, if I do my full structural formula, okay, that one carbon is here, and it has a double bond to an oxygen, and it has a single bond, and quite often you'll see us not put in the bond between the oxygen and the hydrogen. That is normal. So if I'm having a look here, there's my one carbon. I have another bond that needs to be filled. Okay, this needs to have 4 bonds to it. It's already got 3, but I'm saying I only have 1 carbon in the chain. And so if I only have 1 carbon in the chain, that must be a hydrogen. Remember, every time we do any chemistry from Unit 2, we need to go through and add in hydrogens to fulfill carbon's valencies. So now if I have 2 carbons, I want to think about, right, I have 2 carbons in my chain. It has to have this Q group at the end. This carbon has 1, 2, 3, 4 bonds. I'm going to fulfill this carbon's bonds by adding another 3 hydrogens to get my full structural formula. If I have 3 carbons, I'm going to start when I draw these by doing all 3 of my carbons in the chain the same way I do with the alkanes and the alkenes and the alcohols. I'm then going to add in my functional group at the end. This carbon's happy, it has 1, 2, 3, 4 bonds. This one only has 2, so it needs 2 more. This one only has 1, so it needs 3 more. And I'm going to fill in all of my hydrogens. These are my structures. This is before I even get to naming them. This is how I'm going to draw the structures of these. If I want to have a think about my shortened structural formula, now, every time we do a shortened structural formula, let's think about what we always do. We always look at a carbon in its own environment first and cover all the rest of the carbons and then continue from there. Starting with the first one here, there is only 1 carbon. That carbon is part of this functional group, and we're always going to try and keep that functional group together. So that is going to end with COOH. And the only other thing that's attached to that is a hydrogen. Now this is going to look very strange because you're used to writing CH3, CH2. We want to keep that COOH together because it makes it very, very clear that this is a carboxylic acid. Okay, so HCOOH. Having a look at this second one here, this first carbon is a CH3 group. I'm going to cover the rest of the molecule, CH3. So I'm going to start and I'm going to do CH3. And then if I cover that carbon, I have COOH, keeping that together. Let's do this for the third one. CH3. CH2. COOH. There's my shortened structural formula. I'm just looking at the groupings for what each carbon has attached to it. Now let's have a look at the molecular formula. You might know it as the chemical formula. Molecular formula. Here, it's exactly the same. Okay, we always want to keep this COOH together. It just makes it easier for us to know it's a carboxylic acid. So I'm just going to keep that as HCOOH. I'm not going to make that CO2H2. It then gets really complicated when we're trying to work out just from the molecular formula which homologous series we're looking at. Let's have a look here. I still want to keep COOH together. Here I've got CH3, COOH. It ends up being exactly the same. This is where it changes. I want to keep my COOH together, so let's look at the rest of the molecule. We've always added together the carbons and added together the hydrogens. I have 2 carbons, so that's C2. I have 3, 4, 5 hydrogens, so that's H5, COOH. Keeping that together so that you know that it's a carboxylic acid. I want you to be very careful with the molecular formulas when you are telling me the name of these carboxylic acids, which we'll come on to in a wee second. This doesn't just have 2 carbons in it. You need to remember there's another carbon here being used by the functional group, so it has 3. Okay, so we need to remember that. Moving on, let's think about the names. let's think about the names of these. I'll take this on the back of this page just now. Thinking of the names, we've always used prefixes for a number of carbons. So if I've got 1 carbon, the prefix was always meth. 2 carbons, it was eth. 3 carbons, it was prop. If I'm going to have this as an alkane, so we always think of the parent alkane, if it was just a chain of carbons, no functional groups, it would always end in ane. So this became methane. 2 would become eth, ane. And 3 would become prop, ane. Okay? So having a look at that, if I want the carboxylic acid, I'm going to drop the E to get methane. I'm going to add in oic acid. Here I'm going to drop the E and do exactly the same. Ethane, oic acid. Here again, I'm going to drop the E and I'm going to end up with propan, oic acid. So you should be able to take this all the way to 8. Okay, so might be worth a wee while. I'm going to jump this forward so that this ends up being complete and you can see what this would look like if I had 1 to 8. Might be a good idea to pause, see if you can do it for yourself, and then check what you're putting in here. And here you'll see completed 1 to 8, meth to oct, with the name of the alkane, and we were scoring out, getting rid of the E at the end, and adding in oic acid to get the name of all of these. So what you should be able to do is, using this and understanding how many carbons there are, you should be able to jump back to this table and now fill in a completed one with the number of carbons, the name, full, shortened and molecular formula. Again, if you want to pause, you want to give that a go, that's something to try, and in a couple of seconds, I would pause now, because in a couple of seconds you're going to see a completed table with all of these in there. Okay, so here is the full shebang. I made a wee bit, there wasn't enough room, there was too many carbons to fit in here. So this is everything you should be able to do with that knowledge, with the number of carbons, the name, full and shortened structural formula and molecular formula here. Now, also really important to note is our general formula here. So as we go down, we've got HCOOH, CH3, COOH, C2H5, COOH. I think you can see in our general formula, COOH is going to appear. It's more the relationship between the other carbons and hydrogens that we have. Now, methanoic acid is ever so slightly different because it's another hydrogen, but when we think through here, it's the number of carbons. To get from this to that, you double plus 1, so double plus 1, double plus 1. So CN, H2N plus 1, COOH. That's what we're looking at here. So I'm going to double the number of carbons, add 1, add COOH. So if I have 11 carbons, one of them's in the CO group, the COOH, there are 10 left, so I would have C10, H21, COOH, and that should fit within my general formula. Now, if we have just a little look at the slide just now, there's a couple of other things that we need to know when we talk about carboxylic acids. Firstly, think of the uses. So uses of carboxylic acids. Really important one, ethanoic acid is actually the main component in vinegar. So vinegar is acidic, and because of that, we can use vinegar as a household cleaning product or within household cleaning products, and as a preservative in food, so for pickling things, so to preserve food, to make it last longer. So these are some uses. You need to know 1 or 2 and be very specific when you say, you know, carboxylic acid's use is, don't just say cleaning products as an answer. Carboxylic acids are also used in soaps and in medicine, so there's a whole variety of them. We just kind of scratched the surface at National 5. And the other thing we need to think about are the properties of these acids, so physical and chemical properties, so things that are unique to carboxylic acids. So in terms of their physical properties, as you increase the carbon chain, those molecules get bigger. So if we have a quick look back at the page, as we go down this, these become huge. So the bigger they become, the harder they become to melt and boil, and that's because the molecules are attracted to each other and it takes more energy to push them apart. So as you increase that chain length, then you are going to increase the melting and the boiling point. And then the small chains, so usually maybe about 1 to 4, so methanoic acid to butanoic acid, they are miscible in water, which means they are slightly soluble in water. Only the small chains, that decreases as you increase the chain. We call them carboxylic acids because their chemical properties, they have a pH less than 7, looking back at this slide. And they also react in the same way that other acids do, like hydrochloric acid. So I'll do that in another video for you to see the reactions of these acids. But in terms of our carboxylic acids, what we've learned is they all contain this carboxyl functional group, which is this COOH group and its structure. If we name it, we take away the E from the parent alkane, we replace it with oic acid to get methanoic, ethanoic, and so on. They can be used as cleaning products, preservatives, and soaps and medicines. They are miscible in water, so slightly soluble in water, but that's only the smaller chains. And that as they increase, their melting and boiling points also increase. Okay, so they increase in melting and boiling point and become less soluble in water as you increase those carbon chains. So that's it for this video. I hope that's been useful. There's a couple of places where you'll be able to pause. Going over trying to make this is really useful. So try and make this without looking at this. See if you can do it for yourself. And I will see you in the next one.